Take them all!
He ordered.
We move now!
The bandits tied the girls' hands and forced them onto their horses. We go when the moon disappears behind the clouds, Jumai whispered, her eyes darting around. Adamu, a fierce-looking man with a deep scar on his left cheek, stood on the hilltop, his cold eyes narrowing as he looked down at the peaceful village of Saka. The setting sun cast a crimson hue across the village, making it seem like the perfect target for his vicious plans. His men, a group of hardened bandits dressed in ragged clothing, eagerly awaited his command, their horses snorting and kicking dust as if sensing the impending chaos. Adamu's lips curled into a wicked grin, revealing broken teeth stained from years of neglect. He raised his hand and bellowed,
"Now is the good time to attack! Let's go!"
His voice echoed through the air like a distant thunderstorm, sending shivers down the spine of everyone who might have heard it. Without hesitation, his band of marauders poured their horses forward, charging down the hill like a pack of ravenous wolves. The villagers of Saka, a small quiet community of farmers and traders, were completely unaware of the danger approaching. Women were returning from the stream, balancing pots of water on their heads, while their men gathered in small groups, chatting about the day's work on their farms. Children played in the dusty streets, their laughter filling the air with joy. But that joy was about to be shattered. In one of the small mud houses at the edge of the village lived a poor farmer named Bala and his only daughter, Jumai. Jumai was a gentle, hard-working girl of 15, with bright, intelligent eyes and a heart full of dreams. Since Jumai's mother had died when she was very young, Jumai had taken over the responsibilities of the house. Despite their struggles, the bond between father and daughter was strong, and they always found a way to smile through the hardship. That evening, as Jumai was preparing their evening meal, she felt a strange unease settle over her. The air seemed heavier, and the usual calm of the village felt disrupted. She glanced outside and saw a faint cloud of dust rising in the distance. It was unusual for horses to be coming from that direction. "Baba," she called, her voice laced with concern. "Do you see that?" Bala, who had been mending a hoe, looked up and squinted toward the horizon. His face tightened.
"That's strange. No one should be coming from the hill."
Before they could make sense out of it, the distant sound of galloping horses reached their ears. Then came the cries of alarm, echoing from the hearts of the village. Jumai's heart raced as she ran to her father's side. "Baba, me farua." Bala grabbed her hand, pulled her inside the house, and hid her under their bed.
"Harini,"
he said, his voice trembling with fear.
"Kisaya nan Jumai, dan Allah karki pito. Kinjiko?"
Outside, the bandits rode into the village like a storm, shouting and brandishing their weapons. They set fire to houses, dragging people from their homes. Screams filled the air as panic spread through Saka like wildfire. Adamu, towering over the chaos on his black horse, surveyed the destruction with satisfaction. His men were rounding up women and girls, the most valuable prizes in their raid. In the chaos, Jumai could hear the terror outside. The sounds of wailing women and children made her heart pound in her chest. Her hands shook as she covered her mouth, trying so hard to remain calm. Suddenly, the door of their house was kicked open with a violent crash. Two bandits barged in, their faces covered with cloth, eyes gleaming with malice.
"Come out!"
One of them barked, grabbing Bala by the shoulder and throwing him to the ground. They kicked him in the chest, and Bala let out a loud cry of pain. Jumai screamed from her hiding place on seeing what they were doing to her father, but her father shouted at her,
"No, Jumai, run!"
But before she could even move, the second bandit seized her by the arm.
"Not so fast, girl. You're coming with us." "No!"
Bala cried, trying to get up, but a sharp kick to his ribs knocked him down again. Tears streamed down Jumai's face as she struggled to free herself. But the bandit was too strong. She was dragged outside where other girls from the village had already been gathered. Some were crying while others stood in shocked silence, unsure of what was happening. Adamu watched the collection of young girls with a greedy glint in his eyes.
Take them all!
He ordered.
We move now!
The bandits tied the girls' hands and forced them onto horses. Jumai, her heart heavy with fear, looked back one last time at her father, who lay motionless on the ground. She wanted to cry out to him, to run back and help him, but she was powerless as the bandits rode away, taking the girls deep into the wilderness. The village of Saka burned behind them. The once peaceful community was now a smoldering ruin. Hours passed as the girls were taken far, far away from their homes. The bandits led them through dense forests and across rocky hills until they reached a desolate camp hidden deep in the wilderness. The camp was surrounded by tall trees, making it almost invisible from a distance. Jumai, exhausted and terrified, was thrown into a small tent with the other girls. They huddled together, whispering in low voices, wondering what fate awaited them. As night fell, the bandits sat around the fire, celebrating their successful raid. They laughed and drank, boasting about the terror they had unleashed upon the villagers. Adamu, sitting apart from the rest, sharpened his knife with slow, deliberate strokes, his mind already plotting his next move. Inside the tent, Jumai closed her eyes, trying to calm her pounding heart. She prayed silently, asking for strength and a way to escape this horrible situation. Her thoughts turned to her father, wondering if he was still alive, and the weight of the uncertainty crushed her spirit. But then, a soft voice spoke beside her. "They are going to kill us," the girl next to her whispered. It was Aisha, a little girl from a neighboring village who had been captured earlier. Her voice, though soft, carried a certainty that surprised Jumai. "How do you know that?" Jumai asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because that's what they always do," Aisha replied. "We are not meant to be their prisoners and they won't kill us. We will find a way," Jumai assured her, feeling a small spark ignite within her. She didn't know how they would escape or if they ever would, but she wasn't going to give up. Days passed, and life in the bandits' camp was filled with torment. The girls were forced to do labor, cooking and cleaning for the men, while living under constant threat. Some of the bandits would sleep with them, while others watched and laughed. Jumai and a few of the other girls secretly began to plan. They whispered their ideas only at night, waiting for the right moment to make their escape. Adamu, ever the cunning leader, seemed to suspect something. His eyes followed the girls closely, especially Jumai, who had caught his attention more than once. There was something about her that unsettled him, though he couldn't put his fingers on it. One evening, as the sun set and the camp began to quiet down, Jumai overheard a conversation between two of the bandits. They were talking about moving the girls to another location, deeper into the forest. Jumai's heart raced. If they were moved, any chance of escape would be lost forever. She shared the news with the other girls. "We have to go tonight," she said, her voice urgent. "If we don't, we may never get another chance." The girls nodded, their faces pale with fear, but determination glimmered in their eyes. As darkness cloaked the camp, the fire's embers dimming to a soft glow, Jumai and the other girls huddled together, their hearts pounding in unison. The weight of their decision to escape rested heavily on their shoulders. Adamu's men were scattered, some sleeping, others keeping a lazy watch. Jumai knew that any misstep would result in brutal punishment or worse. Jumai glanced around the tent, locking eyes with Aisha, the young girl who had become like a sister to her during their captivity. Aisha nodded, her face pale but resolute. They had no weapons, no maps, no idea what lay beyond the camp, but they had their courage, and for now, that was enough. "We go when the moon disappears behind the clouds," Jumai whispered, her eyes darting to the faint silver moonlight outside. The girls nodded silently. Minutes felt like hours as they waited for the moment. Jumai could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, making her hands tremble. Suddenly, the camp felt eerily silent. The bandits, full from their stolen feasts, had succumbed to sleep. Only a few guards remained by the fire, their heads bobbing as exhaustion threatened to overtake them. It was time. Jumai gestured to the girls, her hands shaking but her resolve steady. They crept out of the tent, moving as quietly as they could. The night air was cool, and the sounds of the forest were all around them. Crickets, owls, the distant rustling of leaves. It all felt surreal, like a dream they could wake from at any moment. Jumai took the lead, her bare feet making almost no sound on the dirt as they inched toward the edge of the camp. They slipped past one of the sleeping guards, their breaths caught in their throats. Each step brought them closer to the tree line, closer to freedom. Jumai could almost taste it. Then, a twig snapped under someone's foot. One of the bandits by the fire stirred, his head lifting. Jumai's heart stopped. She froze, motioning for the girls to do the same. For a moment, everything was still. The bandits grumbled something under his breath and laid his head back down. They moved again, faster this time, their feet barely touching the ground. The trees were just ahead, a dense wall of darkness that promised both danger and salvation. Jumai reached the first tree and ducked behind it, waiting as the others followed her. Suddenly, a shout rang out from the camp.
They are gone!
A voice bellowed, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps and the unmistakable clink of weapons. Panic surged through the girls. Run! Jumai yelled, no longer caring about being quiet. They bolted into the forest, their legs pumping furiously, hearts racing in terror. Behind them, Adamu's men were already mounting their horses, the sound of hooves crashing through the bush. Jumai didn't look back. She grabbed Aisha's hand, pulling her along as they dashed through the dense undergrowth, branches tearing at their clothes and skin. The sound of the horses grew closer, the bandits shouting in the distance, their voices filled with fury. We can't let them catch us, Aisha gasped, her voice trembling. They won't, Jumai replied, though she wasn't sure if she believed her own words. The forest was vast, but the bandits knew it well. They had the advantage. All Jumai and the other girls had was desperation. As they ran, Jumai's mind flickered with memories of her village, her father's smile, the warmth of their simple home. She couldn't let it end like this. She wouldn't. The sound of the horses was deafening now. Jumai glanced back, her heart sinking as she saw the shadowy figures closing in on them. They couldn't outrun them. Not like this. Suddenly, Jumai spotted a narrow ravine up ahead, barely visible in the moonlight. It was a risky move, but it was their only chance. This way, she shouted. Veering toward the edge, the girls followed her without question, their trust in her unwavering. As they reached the ravine, Jumai jumped, her legs barely clearing the gap as she landed on the other side. The others followed suit, one by one, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The bandits reached the edge moments later, their horses skidding to a stop. Adamu cursed loudly, dismounting with fury in his eyes.
Find them!
He bellowed.
Search every inch of this forest. They couldn't have gone far.
Jumai crouched low behind the bush, her heart hammering in her chest as she watched Adamu's men fan out. They weren't giving up. Not yet. She exchanged a glance with Aisha, who was trembling beside her. Stay quiet, Jumai mouthed. The night dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. The bandits searched the forest relentlessly, their torches flickering in the darkness. Jumai prayed silently, begging for protection. She knew that if they were found, there would be no mercy. But then, her eyes hardened with determination. She was no longer just the farmer's daughter. She was a survivor. And whatever came next, she was ready to face it. The bandits moved farther away, their voices growing faint. Jumai exhaled shakily, the tension in her body easing only slightly. But something deep within her whispered that this was only the beginning. There was more to this nightmare, more than just escaping Adamu's grasp. The girls huddled together, their bodies pressed against each other for warmth and comfort. Exhausted, they eventually dozed off. The night was eerily still, save for the occasional rustling of leaves in the gentle wind. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced through the darkness. It was Ummi. Her voice cracked with pain and terror, jolting the other girls awake. Jumai's heart leapt into her throat as she scrambled to her feet, her eyes darting around in confusion. "What's happening?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "Something bit me. I think it's a snake," Ummi wailed, clutching her leg where two distinct fang marks oozed with venom. Her entire body trembled and her face twisted in agony. "Shh," Jumai whispered, trying to cover Ummi's mouth. "You have to stay quiet while I look for help, otherwise they will hear us." But Ummi couldn't stop. The pain was too much, and her scream echoed once more through the trees, louder this time. She writhed on the ground, her hands clutching her legs, tears streaming down her face. The other girls circled around her, whispering frantic prayers, their own fears rising, and then, from deep within the forest came the unmistakable sound of footsteps. The bandits, they had heard the scream. If you enjoyed the story and would like to know how the story progressed, please consider subscribing to this channel, not forgetting to turn on the bell notification icon so that once another video is being posted, you will be the first to be notified. You can also check out these videos here. I promise you won't be disappointed. Till we meet again in my next video, remain blessed.